Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Board of Education. The meeting is called to order at 4:07 p.m. in open session. Tonight, we do not have requests addressing closed session agenda items. At this time, the board will recess to closed session. Open session will resume at approximately 6 p.m. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Tonight's meeting of the Board of Education was called to order at 4:07 p.m. in open session, and the board then adjourned to closed session at 4:07 p.m. We will now reconvene the meeting in open session at 6:18. Thank you for your patience. Board Clerk Amy Stewart will update us on closed session topics. Is that me?
The topics discussed in closed session were student matters, pending litigation, and anticipated litigation. The board took action in closed session to approve student expulsion cases number 23-17-0025 and 23-03-0027. The board also took action in closed session to approve readmission case number 22-17-0013. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Stewart. So replacement pages for items 8.3.1.1, 8.3.1.2, 8.3.1.3, and 9.2.3 are on the back table. Tonight we have requests for public comment. While meetings of the governing board are not public meetings, they are open to the public. Individual speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to address the board on each agenda item or non-agenda item. And the board will limit the total time for public input on each item to 21 minutes as per board bylaw 9322.22. May I please have Ms. Elisa Klein to the podium?
Okay. Imagine me 30 years younger and Alyssa Klein. She asked me to speak on her behalf. So she sent me a message. Okay. Give me 1 second. Here we go. BUSD board leadership. Thank you so much for considering our proposal. They're talking about 9.2.2, the student board member position. I'm sure you already know. I sincerely apologize for being unable to attend tonight's board meeting. I unfortunately have other obligations to attend to. However, I want to emphasize that no matter what, I will continue to be heavily invested in the future of student representation throughout BUSD. I strongly urge you to approve the BB 9150 revision proposed by the subcommittee. Our proposals would ensure a more precise adherence to Ed Code and would address many of the concerns that have arisen the past term surrounding the student board member position. Our proposals would divide the work of the student board member, lightening the load for each elected member and allowing students to focus simultaneously on their high school careers. 3 student board members would allow for various grade levels to be represented on the BUSD board, along with many other benefits. I am slightly disappointed that the creation of student cabinets and the continued existence of the Superintendent's Advisory Board have been omitted from the language of the board policy revisions. However, knowing that we have the support of the BUSD principals, I remain hopeful that student cabinets will be implemented at each secondary school. If permitted, I would love to move forward with creating a game plan for each campus and with the establishment of the student cabinets. I look forward to communicating with the principals and Chris as we make monumental steps for the future of student representation. Again, thank you BUSD board leadership for listening to Chris and I for the past few months and assisting our goals for student voice. The vision you are supporting will help BUSD take important initiative in student leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burrows, for Mrs. Klein. We will now, do we have any amendments to this evening's agenda?
I was requesting early on if, given time permitted, if we were for me to be able to move the new business up.
Is that, we can certainly do it, but if you guys deliberate on that, it's up to you to decide if you want to do that or not, as a board.
The only reason I was requesting it is my vehicle's in the shop and I'm using Access Services. So they're picking me up exactly at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. I don't have the flexibility to stay for going over.
I believe that, Mr. Sarega, is that something that we are able to kind of move up our new items? If staff doesn't have any,
I mean, we can certainly, I was anticipating being done by 9 o'clock, but if you guys want to go ahead and move that, we can definitely do that.
Madam President, is it both new business, or is there a specific one that we want to move to the front?
I believe it's both items on new business. Board Member Hassan, is that because both of those are your items,
Oh, okay.
correct?
Okay. I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with it.
We will allow it. Thank you. So we would need to reorganize our agenda for this meeting.
Thank you.
So we would be pulling out our,
There's also one other, agenda too, we can also, we're gonna withhold 9.3.2.6 classified staffing changes, and we'll be bringing it back to a later date. So that's the other change we want.
okay. So we will be tabling item 9.3.2.6,
Yes.
and we are going to move up our new business, which is 10.1 and 10.2, so that way our fellow board member can speak to them herself. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Do I need to do roll call for this one? Roll call, please.
Dr. Alhassan,
Aye.
Ms. Stewart,
Aye.
Mr. Critchfield,
Aye.
Mrs. Garza.
Aye. Thank you, staff. Thank you, members of the public, while we kind of reorganize our agenda for tonight. In so doing so, we will now go to our new meetings, sorry, to me.
Shoot the flag salute. Let's do maybe we can do the flag salute, the
Yes.
recognition, and then that.
Thank you.
All right.
Let's go ahead and do our flag salute.
All right, I'll go ahead and lead the flag salute, so if you can please stand. Put your right hand over your heart and follow me. 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Drotti. So then, at this time, recognitions, Dr. Drotti?
Yes, if I can ask board to come down in front of the dais, please.
Before doing so, since I have only access to this mic,
Yeah.
I'd just like to do a brief introduction to our presenter who's coming on behalf of Supervisor Janice Hahn on recognizing the district on the 33rd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I wanted just to make a comment in saying that the spirit of the ADA is basically a model for disability rights around the world. And it's a standard of how individuals with disabilities should be treated and accommodated in society. This has helped raise awareness and promote the rights of disabled people worldwide. So I just wanted to say that before we all move down.
Great. At this time, I'll pass this on to Mrs. Carter, and then she'll help facilitate the presentation.
So as we're coming down to in front of the dais, I'd like to bring up Field Representative Ms. Lauren Yokomizu, who would like to present a scroll on behalf of Supervisor Jan Hannes. Welcome, and please come forward. Thank you. That's the end of recognitions.
I think we are right now at presentation from student, staff, and community is the next thing.
So let's go ahead and have communications from Miss Rita Najeda Miss Rita Rivera is not here at the moment, didn't feel well. So Miss Linda Morgan will be stepping in her place. Please, Miss Morgan, thank you.
Hi, good evening. I did prepare a little slide presentation, so I'll let the slides do most of the talking since I'm not as comfortable as Ms. Rita is up here. But I will do my best. So I am, as of 5 days ago, the new Bellflower Council PTA president. Yeah, we're just getting started. This is our theme, our little logo. And to the right, you'll see all our PTA units. So when I say council, we're a board and a group, but we support all 12 of our units. So just a little bit of information about PTA. Again, these presentations are new, and I'm not sure what information we should be presenting. So this is just a little start, and in the next couple months, it'll be less about council, more on our units and all the amazing things that they're going to be doing. But right now, we're in the planning stages. So you get this. A little bit about National PTA. PTA is Parent Teacher Association. You saw our 12 units. We have 2 PTSAs at the high schools, and that's Parent Teacher Student Association, so they have a student board member. As far as Bellflower Council and the logo, the SOAR for Serve, Outreach, Advocate, and Renew, our commitment to being a powerful voice for all children, a relevant resource for parents, and a strong advocate for public education. Yeah, like I said, a little bit about PTA and the flow chart. We are Bellflower Council, and we support our units all the way to the right. On top, above us, I guess, would be 33rd District PTA, California State and National. So that's kind of the hierarchy. And then below you see our board members. I'm not going to read all their names, but I am very, very happy to be working with all of them. And I will be delegating this and many other things to some of my board members. So yeah, like I said, we're transitioning and planning. The few events that we as council do have on our calendar already are Red Ribbon Week coming up in October 23rd through the 27th. And then we usually do our awards ceremony on December 5th, celebrating all the amazing things that our units did during that week. They'll have assemblies and activities for the students, all, you know, drug-related or drug-free, right? Sorry. Reflections is, could possibly or be starting at some of the units. They may have asked students to start writing or taking pictures for our Reflections art program. If not, we will encourage them and support them to get started soon. And for that, our award ceremony is March 5th, 2024. I know this sounds far away, but time seems to be flying. And then towards the end of my term, I guess May 7th, is our annual historian mixer. Those 3 dates are set. Those are kind of our association meetings, so we invite everybody, and you guys are also invited. And like I mentioned earlier, hopefully for some of the unit events and things, we'll keep you guys up to date and share all of that so you guys can attend as well. Some of the reasons and benefits of joining PTA. Today's, you know, PTA's role is more important than ever in connecting parents, teachers, and administrators in supporting critical school needs. We want every family in our school to join PTA because we can do more together than we can apart. Or, you know, we're stronger together, better together. So yeah, we're trying to create that community and share information with you guys as much as we can. Just to clarify, becoming a PTA member does not mean you need to serve on the board and be on campus 24/7. Some of us have the luxury and get to enjoy doing that, but many do not. But you know, those that can, please volunteer, help out an event. If you can't help out, donate to the event, whether it's time, resources, whatever you can. So yeah, that's my plea right there. And then my goal was to have a slide with the QR code for all the units, but I don't have access to that yet. So 5 days into my term, and I will get those to you as soon as we can. So hope you guys join. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Morgan.
Can I ask a question real quick? Is it possible to get that slideshow sent to us, maybe emailed to us?
Yeah.
Just so we have the flow chart?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Will you guys do that, or do you want me to do it?
No, that's
Okay.
great.
Yeah, I emailed it to Karen. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Can we have it in the 5-minute memo then? Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you. So, new business?
Let me just explain what new business is, because that's a new thing we have on the agenda. So for the rest of the board and community, this past semester we've really been studying our board meetings and how efficient we can be. We think that we can be more efficient. So we've been working with legal counsel just to try to make sure that the presentations are properly clear for the public to understand what's happening, as well as us being more efficient and timely in our deliberations, so that way people aren't so tired at the end. Not that we promise that we're always in and out, because you never control what people are going to say, but we can try our best to try to be more efficient. So we're going to be coming forward with some ideas, concepts for the rest of you to consider to restructure the meeting times and the processes we have for that efficiency. One of those things that we want to try to experiment today is new business, because there's always sometimes need for certain board members and things like that that want certain discussions to happen. But in order to get permission to say, let's have this conversation, we established the new business as a place where if a board member has a request to discuss something, it's an opportunity for him or her to come ask the rest of the board to suggest it, and then you guys vote on that, and then we get guidance on when they want to bring that item back. So we have 2 items today that are requested from Dr. Sue and Ms. Mara Garza. I'll have you introduce the topics then.
Thank you, Dr. Darty. So the first item of business under new business is the Student Ambassador Safety Plan. Board Member Zia Hessen requests to agendize the Student Ambassador Safety Plan as a discussion item for a future meeting. Dr. Hessen, would you mind speaking a little bit towards this?
Yes, thank you, Board President Garza. Thank you. So this is really more than just the Student Ambassador Program. And the reason I wanted just to show you the model, which will go into more discussion, but I just want to briefly highlight some points of why I brought this forward to the board and to our superintendent, is that we're including many safety issues to support our sites. And I wanted to make sure it's a systemic process. So as things come into the district that we look at to incorporate, it's part of a system that will be done across sites. So we're consistent, so there's a process that happens. So this model is based not only on the LA County safety best practices that I looked at, but also other research. And just briefly, the reason I'm bringing this forward to you is that we would have this on a board agenda item to further discuss and have the board adopt, so that when we include safety issues or student issues, that it would be part of this process, specifically in regards to, I call the systemic model on school safety and student well-being. So it goes above and beyond just student safety. And the reason it does is that if you see the different components here, it's a 360 feedback loop, meaning no one is working in isolation of the other. And each one is a component of a change agent to make things happen. So for example, I included the student ambassadors. That's something that I thought is more empowering for our students, and I had been sharing with some parents that also agree. And the reason being is that students are the pulse of our school sites. They know, and as we have seen recently, we're able to identify students that had issues or were carrying weapons on campus. So that's part of it. We also have our parents, we have our district administrators, law enforcement, and community partnerships. So I wanted just to share this with you. I won't go into each detail because every circle or every different process of the model has roles and responsibilities. And so I would like to bring this back to the board to further discuss how we can incorporate this, where we're looking at, excuse me, I'm losing my voice now, where we're looking at, for example, the dogs and bringing them on site. That would fall under law enforcement. But also doing training for students on the student ambassador on student well-being, understanding trauma, understanding the issues of suicide among our students. So those are things that are just part of the model that would be including. Any questions or?
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Dr. Darty, does this sounds a lot to maybe a component that you're working on, right?
Yes, obviously we have a lot of things that we're considering in terms of safety that you guys need to approve. I know 2 board meetings ago we brought in what it would mean to bring drug dogs on campus and also the armed security. And we still have to kind of get permission on what you guys are going to do with some contracts on that. So that's coming. But there's a whole bunch of other components of our safety practices, priorities that we want to implement. The student ambassador one is one I'm familiar with. But I know that's going to take that's not just flipping my finger. We got to talk to staff and get trainings and get, so that component I get. The other pieces, I guess I would need more clarity on. I know what law enforcement is. We're going to do all this stuff together already, but there must be a model that I guess I would have to get with Dr. Sue to understand specifically what outcomes we would look for with each of these components and what it would look like in practice and all that. So, but in terms of student ambassadors, I have a mental model in mind, but it's not going to be something easily implemented. I got to get students involved and principals and the high school staff involved to say, okay, let's establish a student ambassador system. But the rest, law enforcement, we have I'm going to be bringing forward an idea besides the armed security, which you still have to vote on. Identifying a resource officer is one of the priorities that we want to consider, and for you guys to consider that. I don't know if people want that or not. I know what the survey says, but at the end of the day, are we going to bring that contract forward? The student ambassador case, I was going to wait till I talked to staff and all that. That was going to be more of a year-long process of developing. Parents, obviously, we communicate, so I need to understand what all that will mean in terms of safety. I know, yeah.
That's right, and that's why I could bring it back, but the purpose of this was to introduce it and to have the board then put it on, to have it agendized, to further explain how all those components you talked about are part of the system. So that's what I'm saying, is that we don't want to bring in different components and don't see how they work. The process is, when you bring in a component, you identify how it supports the system, and then where it falls through in regards to communication. So it's all student approach, because that's our focus, is our students. And so being able to have something that when you pass it on from site to site, they understand why we're bringing this in, why the training is happening for students, why the training is happening for parents in regards to supporting their students on the sites and supporting their teachers too on site. So everything that we're doing is part of a system, not scattered in different areas, and it doesn't follow an organized process, so that when any part of a system is not working, you can go back and identify, okay, where is it? What's the gap? Where is it? We can come back and then further discuss.
Madam President, if I may ask, I appreciate any discussion on safety, and I appreciate that effort on this. My question would be, from a board perspective, if we brought this back, which action would you be looking for the board to take? Because what I'm hesitant about is crossing the line and doing staff work when it comes to giving them direction, having them develop the plans and us approving those plans. Which action would you be looking for the board to take if we were to take this up as a discussion?
It'd be exactly what you said, to create a system or model for staff to take action on.
But I think what I'm hearing is that we already have some of these components already working. I think we've been working on it for a few months from the updates we've been getting.
But you're not showing how it ties in.
Right, so maybe that's something that we can add in a discussion as far as in our discussions of safety. What we'd want to see as a board is how these systems tie in and how they work as a system. But I think that would be more appropriate to give that direction to staff to take a look at these ideas and relay back to us how those things you're working on do tie in to address the very concerns here.
Yeah, so anytime you have a comprehensive safety plan, none of it works in isolation.
Yeah.
So we have drills that involve police officers. If we have drug dogs, that'll be a part of the plan. If we have taller fences, vests, remember, there's a whole host of things that we're considering. How all that comes together is what we were going to do already anyway, I guess. I would need clarity for staff what is missing from our process that does not tie all this stuff in, because our safety plans ties this stuff in. So I guess it will probably mean you guys just looking at our safety plans when it's developed, because at the end of the day, we're going to ask the principals to work with their administration in the community to say, okay, what happens in a safety drill? What happens in a lockdown? What happens in this? Who's involved in what, and how do we communicate with parents? That's all a part of responding to safety, and we plan to do that. We just don't have all the components approved yet. Once we get it approved, we're going to put it all together to make sense. So if that's what you're looking for, that's going to come. It's just I need to, right now, I don't know if you guys want resources officers or not, or I don't know if you want armed guards or not. I don't know if you want drug dogs. We introduced them, but no contract has been approved yet. So the point is, I want all those things, and if you approve all of them, we tie it all together, in our safety plans for people, for staff to execute.
So
That's
it's,
how I'm looking at it, and if there's guidance on how you guys want us to approach that, maybe you would continue to add that in our processes, but the goal is always to tie it in. Nothing ever operates in isolation. That's
yes.
the only way it's gonna work.
So if I'm understanding correctly what you're saying, just to clarify, for my own purposes, hopefully it helps everybody else, we're going to be working backwards, kind of to set those, this is our goal in mind, kind of like what we do in teaching. This is where I need to get, this is a standard I need to address. I'm going to build those systems and start working backwards, planning it so that when I start teaching it or when we start implementing it, all those pieces, like you said, will tie in together. This is already something that your staff has already looked at and is planning currently. Is it possible to get maybe perhaps a timeline of when these things will happen?
Yes, so, as, again, all those things, and they say law enforcement, for example. We have the way we deal with law enforcement right now is we call 911 to get help. What I'm trying to do is get a police officer that belongs to us that we can call, that can work with us on a daily basis. That has not been approved yet. I gotta get that first to even change up what we're doing with law enforcement. Drug dogs, wherever they land in this piece, is another contract. And once that's approved, we're gonna fuse it in. Armed guards, if you guys are gonna approve that when we bring a contract to you, if it's a yay, then that's a part of the whole system. But whatever components of it that we develop is gonna end up being a manuscript that we all use as a system and all that. So for example, if we start next year with our law enforcement, with what I'm wishing, then we deal with it how we deal with law enforcement now. That's what the plan is going to be.
Madam President.
If there's no armed guards, we deal with our safety plan deals with safety without armed guards. But right now, I got all those components for it to fit together.
Madam President, if I may, because I know that the new business's student ambassador safety plan, so is it more about the student ambassador element of this, or is it the whole thing? Because it sounds like if it's the idea of this model, it sounds like we don't have the blue circles in order to really talk about how they all work together yet. So I think it might be a little bit premature.
So the roles
I'll
have
wait
been
till-
identified, but I didn't want to use this time for doing that because that wasn't the purpose of this segment. This segment was basically, from my understanding that was presented to me, is that I introduced the topic, I introduced why we want to do this, and the board then, we decide as a board, yes, let's have this agendized so that we can have further discussion and discuss the roles and responsibilities. Because everything that Dr. Durati is talking about is part of the roles and responsibilities that have been identified. So what I'm trying to do is that everything that Dr. Durati is working on is that we have it in a systemic process, which is what he's saying, and that we include components that maybe we haven't thought about. So when we talk about the Student Ambassador Program, that ties into also our student board member, our student board cabinets that were talked about earlier. They're the key components as part of the change agent. So, and that we would have further discussion on how they would go through training and how they'd participate into the peer-to-peer counseling and focus groups that would encompass our wellness program that we already have. So everything that I had included in the model were things that are existing on our site, but it pulls it together in a cohesive manner so that when we are presenting it to other sites or we are presenting it out to the public, that it's something that's visual, they can see and understand how it works together. And the other part is that each role is clearly identified. Everybody knows where they are in the process. And that's where the 360-degree feedback loop comes in. And that's where it comes to be change agents, because each person in this role is a change agent, as well as us on the board.
Can I add or to clarify too? So if I'm understanding, because we've been talking about safety over the last several months, from when we did a presentation to the board and the community regarding some of our safety strengths that we have in place across the districts, and also identifying some of the areas for growth. in addition to that, we also spoke to the fact that more recently, because of the most recent incidents, we've also done some more work in regards to surveying our staff and community regarding additional safety measures. So we're at a point now where we have all this information, we need to start bringing it together
Right.
and be able to communicate out what are we doing for these specific areas.
Right.
And what maybe one of the things I'm taking away is a mental model which outlines what are the things that we are doing district-wide, to have that visualization for all stakeholders and educational partners of what does this area look like.
Right.
And then but I think, for example, one item tonight, there is an action item for regarding one of the safety measures, but it's really once bringing it all together for the board and community and for staff. What are the things we are doing across the board to address the needs of our students,
Right.
for the parents, for the staff, and what are those safety measures that we have currently in place and we're looking to add? So I think I'm taking away as a need for a mental model, which
Right.
identifies what are the things that we have in place
Right.
and the things we're looking to also enhance on.
Correct.
That's what
Correct.
I'm
And so
picking
when
up on.
you're right, it's a mental model, but the purpose of the mental model is actually to give a framework and foundation to all those things that you had just mentioned. I won't reiterate everything that you just said, but yeah, you got exactly my point, and that's why I thought as a board we need to look at this, because we are currently creating systems already happening, but how does it all come together?
Okay.
How are we going to be able to show parents and the public that this is really going to be supporting our students, our campuses, our teachers? So that's something that I think when you have a visual model, people grab a hold of it much better. Many of us are a visual society, even based on social media and so forth that's happening.
If I'm hearing both sides, could we please have Dr. Alhassan work with staff and the superintendent to make sure that we get that model, perhaps? Just a draft, maybe just a draft, because I know that what I'm understanding, you guys are working on these things currently. But what I believe Dr. Alhassan is saying, we need a visual picture so that way our community understands where in this process we are. Is that correct?
That's correct, but also as Dr. Avila mentioned, is that it also will show where we need to go.
Yes.
Additional steps, like missing gaps that we need to look into. Because once you map it out, you can look and say, oh, wow, we're missing this key component in law enforcement. Let's see what we can do to bring that.
And
these type of things.
I believe that you're both saying the same thing, is what I'm hearing, that they already kind of know what those pieces are, but we need a visual model, is what I'm hearing from you. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
And
Okay.
that's something we can, as we look, because Ms. Carter was reminding me about, because we start the process, it's a yearly basis in which we do our safety planning. So in March, they're approved, but our school sites begin the process in August in preparation for all the drills that we need to conduct, all the different safety protocols we put in place. We start reinstitute our process for PBIS, which is another element. So it's just the visualization, I think, would help to help everybody understand how are we providing a safe, supportive environment to our students and parents and
Right.
staff. So
Absolutely.
I think that's helpful information.
Yeah, I don't want to put anything out there that we're thinking about doing but not doing. So whatever we create, we're going to need time to put it all together. Right now, I don't have any kind of student ambassador is just a word that we have. It's in my mind. If Dr. Sue has an idea, I have an idea. I'm sure the other principals probably have an idea. We haven't come together to even understand, come together on what that is yet. So I'm only using that as an example of one of the components. I want to be very careful about putting something out that people are going to think this is what you're doing. Yeah, we can put a promise out there like, okay, we promise to do this, but I guess that could be frustrating for people too. So we are going to connect all this stuff together, like Dr. Avila just mentioned. It needs to be something that our staff and students and community understands how we deal with safety, but it needs to be something real and authentic, not a dream, but an actual reality. So if we're going to develop a mental model on something, and if we actually want, let's just say if you say have something ready by, I don't know, August, it's not going to have some of those components because I don't have contracts proved yet, right? But if I can certainly include what we do have, create something like that, and then continue to add on to it.
That's right. And
But,
then as-
but I just want to make sure that the timing of all this is essential. The ambassador piece, that's a whole year of work is going to be getting people to understand what we're trying to create out of that. So
Okay.
based on what I know about student ambassadors.
That's right. And as President Garza had mentioned, it'd be something that I'd be helping to work with staff on it. There's lots of research, lots of already precedent, lots of models already used in school districts across the nation that use the student ambassador model that have been very successful. So, yes, that would be fine.
So I'm so sorry.
I
Go
just
ahead.
had a question. If like a board member, like she was saying, she works on it with staff, is that considered a subcommittee or no? Or are we just allowed to work with staff on things like that?
We can request, or Mr. Sorega?
Generally, on any board or council, a board member or a council member does not work directly with staff on items to be brought before the board. That's a general rule. It's based on a strong, for example, city manager, strong superintendent model. The board gives direction to the superintendent. The superintendent takes that direction and carries it out and brings something back to the board. If the board is not happy with what's been brought back, they send them back to the drawing board and do it again. But generally, it's not viewed as proper for a board member to work directly with staff in the implementation of anything, whether it's a general safety plan or a SWOT analysis or anything like that. So it would be more appropriate to provide staff with direction of what you would like them to do. You can always send them information in terms of, research that you have and things of that nature to provide to them. They then take that and bring back the finished product to the board for your approval at that time. The fact that this was agendized is why we're actually able to speak on it today, because normally new business will not function this way. Just want to throw that out there as well. New business is simply for a board member to bring up an item that they would like to discuss at a future agenda.
Right.
Board will take a vote on whether or not to bring that item back. Since it's been put on the agenda, there's a little bit more leeway involved, but as a general rule, boards should not be working with staff on specific items to develop and bring back before the board.
So I would just be like an
Thank-
advisor if they brought it up.
So once you provide them the information and direction and they bring it back, then you make comments and you basically state where it's deficient or
I
where
see.
it's positive. And if the board wants to send it back for revisions, then they bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay.
So then, we are gonna go ahead and vote to bring it back and agendize it for a future meeting. But what I'm hearing is that,
So no vote
no
needs to
vote,
be
sorry.
taken because it's not being brought back at a specific meeting, because I don't think staff has a date in mind that,
Okay.
they can for sure. All that needs to be done is direction provided to staff on what you would like to see in that.
Okay.
I don't know if it's been clear to staff, they can voice that or not, but just clear direction on, we'd like to see a model that shows these things.
Okay. So I think since it's been presented already, we're
Yeah.
done. Thank you. On to the next new business. Dr. Al-Hassan?
Okay, so the next item of business was actually having the board item, excuse me, let me pull that number.
(9322.2).
Thank you. And that has to do with a bylaw that we had tabled back in December. Since it was tabled, I wanted just to have it brought back on the agenda to have voted on. Thank you.
Do we have discussion or is it just brought back?
So if you want to bring this item back, there would be a motion, a second, and the board would vote whether to place that item on a future agenda or not. That is basically how the system functions. You bring up an item, motion, second, and a vote. If it fails, it does not get brought back. If it passes, it gets brought back at the next meeting.
Madam President. if
But
I
are
may-
we
so-
allowed to make comments or to like say why we would or would not want to bring it back? Or is
There's-
that not happening today?
There's no discussion on the
Oh,
item.
okay.
It's just a vote whether to bring it back or not.
If I could, so it's a vote if we're asking to bring it back at a specific meeting.
Yeah,
But if it's more of a general, we want to see this, it's direction to the,
yes.
Thank you for those clarifications. Obviously, this is a new piece on our agenda, so thank you so much for your patience, audience. So again, public participation, public comment. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we bring this item up to vote at the next board meeting.
second.
Roll call?
Dr. Alhassan,
Aye.
Ms. Stewart,
No.
Mr. Critchfield,
Aye.
Mrs. Garza.
No.
So in a tie, the motion fails.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Since it's a tie, the motion fails. Thank you, Mr. Sarega. Thank you, staff. We will now move on to the following.
Madam President, if I could, just for general, for my own knowledge, when we do in the future table an item, what does that mean?
So you can either table it for discussion at a later time, or you can table it for discussion later on in the agenda. Basically, tabling means we're putting it on pause.
Right, but is it common procedure to have that on the next agenda?
It's up to the board's discretion whether they do that or not. You can make a motion to table the meeting until the next
For a
agenda.
specific, okay.
Yes.
So you
So
want to
the-
be more specific when you table?
Yeah, the motion is for tabling it.
So this bylaw is no longer in existence.
Whether the bylaw was or was not in existence, it doesn't change that. The bylaw you just voted on was to bring it back at another time.
But it was never voted upon to incorporate.
If it was never approved by the
Yeah.
board, then it's not a bylaw.
That's right, okay. So we have a no bylaw at this time that talks about scheduled meetings, meeting time and dates,
That's
and public participation.
right. So those,
So as long as the board's aware of what they just did.
I thought the bylaw exists already, but I think
It was the
what you're trying to do is
changes
we're changing it, correct?
So the changes are not
yes,
approved,
the change is
Right.
not approved
but the
because
bylaw stands.
even if you would have approved this item, no change would have been approved. This item would have been brought back at the next meeting. The fact that it didn't pass or the motion failed means that it is not being brought back at the next meeting. Nothing else changes, nothing else is done to the current board bylaws.
And for clarity, when you do table and don't vote to bring it back, there's a certain time frame you can't bring it back to the board, correct?
Can you say that again?
So when you vote to not bring something to the board, you can't do that every meeting. There's a certain time frame you can't.
What do you mean by vote to not bring something to the board?
So if you,
Table.
Oh,
you-
so if you,
so you said it
next meeting, you make
failed,
the same.
right, you can't keep making the same motion for the same item.
You
like
you can until the board basically,
Tells you to be quiet.
tells you to stop or censors you for,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the clarifications. So we will now go back to public hearings. Do we have public hearing tonight?
No public hearing.
Approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve agenda item 9.1.1, approval of minutes, June 8th, 2023, regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Dr. Alhassan,
Aye.
Ms. Stewart,
Aye.
Mr. Critchfield,
Aye.
Mrs. Garza.
Aye. Do I have a motion to approve agenda item 9.1.2, approval of minutes of June 15, regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Dr. Alhassan,
Aye.
Ms. Stewart,
Aye.
Mr. Critchfield,
Aye.
Mrs. Garza.
Aye. Now we're on to board policies and procedures. Do I have a motion to approve agenda item 9.2.1, first reading of board policy 5121, grades evaluation of student achievement?
So moved.
Second, is it consent agenda? Or?
This is up for discussion, is that correct?
So discussion can be had, generally before the motion's made, but it's perfectly fine after as well. So once a motion and second's made, discussion can still be had on the item prior to the vote.
Thank you. So,
I would like to bring the item up for discussion.
So unfortunately, a motion has already been made to pass the item. The board can deliberate among themselves. They can ask questions of staff, but it would be improper to receive a staff presentation on the item at this point. You can withdraw your motion and have a staff presentation on it if there is staff presentation.
I'd like to withdraw my motion for Board Policy 9.2.1.
Second.
So now they can present, and then discussion, deliberation, and then a motion to vote.
I believe we're on 9.2.1 right now for the board policies and procedures.
yes.
So at this time, I'll bring up Mrs. Carter, who will share information on the revision of 9.2.1.
Thank you. So tonight we're bringing forward Board Policy 5121. We will be providing information only for Administrative Regulation 5121. And I'm going to go through some technical information, but I'm going to try to explain it as thoroughly as possible. So typically, we only bring forward policy for your review, as the work of the board is to approve policy, and the work of the administration is to develop how policy will be implemented. The how of the implementation is written in the administrative regulation, and it's not under the purview of the board. At the end of this presentation, you'll have an opportunity to review the proposed changes to policy in order to discuss. However, the information shared with you tonight regarding the administrative regulation is only informational. And I'll explain why in a minute. BUSD's practice is to review administrative regulations in cabinet and update them if agreed upon by the superintendent. CSBA agrees with this practice. As you can see, their guidance on updating administrative regulations is that they are generally amended as needed without prior board approval. Although it's not our practice to bring administrative regulations to the board, the changes being made to the BUSD regulation and outlined here tonight will have an impact on our students' transcripts and GPAs. Therefore, we felt it important to ensure that the board and the public are aware of the changes that are being made and its impact. We were planning only to modify the update to the regulation. However, upon review, we felt that it was important to bring the policy up to date with our current law and our practices. So to help understand some of the changes being made, it's important to have some historical context of the board policy and the regulation. First, this policy and regulation was adopted by CSBA in July of 2009. BUSD reviewed and revised its policy and regulation in November of 2013. CSBA revised its version in July 2016. However, we did not review or revise our policy or regulation at that time. On a separate timeline, in March of 2020, schools were closed due to COVID, and the state declared the students should not be harmed while schools are closed. LACO provided guidance to districts in April of 2020 with regard to temporary grading practices that could be used to adhere to the state's decision to not harm students during this time. In May, BUSD communicated with parents the temporary grading practices that would be implemented for BUSD students. So I'm going to give you a little bit more history on that. At that time, the state gave districts freedom to determine how they would not harm students during the closure of schools and as we transitioned into distance learning from March to June of 2020. Based on that information provided, the state, LACO provided options to districts and detailed the pros and cons of the options that we could select. A con of pass, no pass, or credit, no credit grades was not having a letter grade. The transcript could impact students' entrance into college and scholarship opportunities. Traditional letter grades could be impacted by students not completing assignments, which could cause a lower grade. Assigning incomplete could be a time cost for teachers and families, as students would need to complete assignments within a designated period of time for teachers to review it, grade it, and then have it in that grading period. And there may have been additional record keeping with communicating needs with holding students harmless or opting students into independent study. So at the time of the school closures, BUSD's grading regulation included incomplete, but it didn't include pass or no pass, or credit, no credit. Therefore, BUSD provided guidance to families in May of 2020 that students would not receive a grade mark lower than the grade they had at the time of closure, and in secondary, students would not receive a grade below a D. Students on the A through G track could be assigned an incomplete prior to the end of the 1920 school year in order for the student to complete the work, especially if they needed to complete it to earn a C or better at that time and turn it in. During this time, UC and CSUs were accepting credit, no credit, and pass, no pass marks in lieu of letter grades for all courses, including A through G courses, through the summer of 2020. This means that the colleges allowed these marks not to impact the calculation of GPAs for future applicants, and later the colleges extended this practice through the summer of 2021. After the summer of 2020, the state's no harm policy was no longer in place, but there was still an impact of COVID as students were learning in a distance and hybrid or an in-person environment with multiple quarantines throughout the 2021 school year. As such, and as mentioned, the colleges updated their policies to continue to allow pass, no pass, credit, no credit courses not to impact GPAs for the summer of 2021. Because of these updates, BUSD administrators determined that using the value of a no mark for students that were failing a course would benefit all students, including students on the A through G track. And it wouldn't impact their GPAs, and students would still ultimately have to retake that class. So when calculating a GPA for a semester, each letter grade counts as a point. Typically A's a 4, B's a 3, C's a 2, D's a 1, and F's a 0. The points for the grades are added up and then they're divided by the classes. So on these two charts, you can see that students that have an F are going to have that lower grade point average because the 0 is going to be included in the average calculation. However, a student with a no mark, because the no mark isn't included in the GPA, is in that calculation and that division, it's not going to impact their GPA. Therefore, students that receive an F or no mark also, as I said before, they would still need to repeat their class. So this historical background is hopefully going to help you understand some of the changes that we're making to our practices when students are repeating classes. So the major change to the regulation being shared tonight is what happens when a student repeats a class. Currently, the BUSD practice requires all courses taken by a student to be on this transcript, including the first and second course. This is a list of codes that can be marked in our Student Information System, or ARIES, when a student is repeating a course. Our system is set up for the repeat class to be marked as an R. And you can see at the top what R means. Each mark on the table has a different outcome with regard to noting the credits attempted, and that's across the top. Credits attempted, credits completed, and whether the class is going to be counted in the GPA or not. When a student repeats a course, we mark an R on the course for the lowest grade. Marking an R code counts the class as attempted, does not count the course as credits completed, and counts the grade and the GPA. This means that the course marked as repeated will remove the credits completed from the transcript and not count it for completing graduation. However, the points earned through the 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0 for the first attempt at the class and the second attempt at the class are averaged into the student's GPA. This practice lowers the student's GPA since the student is being impacted by both grades for one course. However, as you saw on the previous slide, a no mark is not counted in the GPA, so the repeat code does not impact students that earn the no mark, thereby continuing that support that we were providing to our struggling students as we were returning from COVID. So this practice is a long-standing BUSD practice. However, when it was brought to the attention of our Director of Instructional Support and Improvement, she questioned why we would double penalize a student and set a course for determining whether this practice could be changed. So as this was a change in practice that impacts students' grades, we spent this year analyzing and researching the impact of this change and the best practices for moving forward. A review of the local districts revealed that the districts that had updated their board policies and regulations after the 2016 CSBA update included language that only the higher grade of the two courses would be computed into the count of the GPA. This slide shows District A, which has not updated their policy or regulation, like us, and have the same practice of averaging both grades on the transcript. However, districts B, C, D, E, and F, and the following slides did update their practice. So just for clarity, District A is doing the same thing that we are doing currently. B, C, D, E, and F have updated their practices. A review of the local colleges that most of our students attend also reveal the same practice of only averaging the highest grade into the student's GPA. So we looked at Cerritos, CSU, and UC. So the historical impact of not updating our practice and thereby causing that repeat course to average the two grades for the course, it didn't impact how the local colleges calculated the GPA because local colleges, they calculate them on their own. They don't just accept what high schools provide them. So that wasn't a necessary impact to our students. However, the students' GPA also allows them to earn honor roll, scholarships, and accolades during high school. Therefore, this change to our practice, it'll help our students be more competitive with the students attending other districts in the future. So to be in line with CSBA guidance in many local districts, we are changing our practice to use the A code for repeating a course. So I put the chart back up there. You can see R's crossed off and we'll be using A. This code will be placed on the lowest grade of the repeated course and thereby remove the credits and will not average the grade into the GPA. So you're going to see credits attempted because the student did attempt the course, but credits completed will not be there because that course was not completed, but it will also not be in the GPA as well. This is going to positively impact the student's transcript and will allow our students to be competitive with other districts from similar districts. I thought a graphic might help here. So as you can see from this table, when the A code is used, it positively impacts our students' GPA. So in the first chart, you see the R is on the F, and because that 0 is, because that class is part of the division, it drops the GPA. When we use the A, because it's not included in the GPA, it will change it. So this revision is going to be implemented for the 23-24 school year. The change will not cascade into previous years. An analysis of how this change will impact students revealed that our top-ranked students, GPAs did not change, as the students at the top ranking don't tend to repeat courses. This will have the most impact for our students that are below 3.0. And so the 23-24 school year, we will include this, and our GPAs will only include the credit for the highest course that was given or earned. So we're updating our administrative regulation to make this change in the repeat section, as seen on this slide. Just for information, there are some other revisions that are being made to the administrative regulation. They're being made based off of Ed Code, CSBA guidance, clarity of current practices. We're not looking to change anything that's not, or update the regulation that's not something that's current practice or part of law at this time. So in summary of this slide, we include progress marks on our elementary report card, so now we'll reference them in the regulation. The secondary sites do not remove students that have received a grade of below C for earning honor roll, as the practice is equitable, being that we're recognizing a student that's earned a 3.0 regardless of a low grade that they may have received, so that's updated. Pass, no pass, and no marks are being defined in the regulation. Our independent study program grading practice is being described. Our grade points for college courses are being described, and information regarding Ed Code for physical education grades was included. Education code related to when a failing grade is assigned due to excessive unexcused absences regarding requirements to provide parent information and time to have a reasonable time to explain absences and include in the student's record why they were failing the class due to excessive unexcused. That's in Ed Code. That's included. And information about how grade point averages are calculated was added. So as mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, since we're making revisions to the regulation for the upcoming year, it made sense to review the board policy as well. Plus, we wanted to make sure that we shared our changes to this regulation with you, the board, and our public as well, since it does have an impact. But moving forward, a positive impact for our students so that they can be more competitive with other districts that have updated their regulation. So on this slide is the board policy. This is what's being brought forward tonight for our first reading. The update to this policy, they're based on Ed Code, or updates the policy based on current practices. But please note, although CSBA provides research about attendance and that it shouldn't be included in grades, the Ed Code in that highlighted section only speaks to the right of students to be able to make up work for excused absences, not unexcused absences. And so in the second reading that will be brought forward to you, the changes that are on this slide here will be part of that. So I wanted to note that for you as well. So this policy and the regulation revisions have been reviewed by secondary and elementary administrators to ensure it matches our current practices. Training will be provided to administration at the beginning of the year in order for the updates to be shared with our teachers and update our handbooks. And our next steps for the policy are for any discussion and for the policy to be brought back in August. I hope that was clear.
Thank you, Dr. Jardy and Ms. Carter. Any questions or comments?
Yes. So you're not setting in a time frame for assignments to be completed, like within the semester or within, there's no accountability?
Are you talking about the reasonable time that they have?
Yes.
At this time, we're going to look at that at a site and staff decision as far as that reasonable time.
Yeah, my other, that you eliminated unexcused absences, to me was not acceptable. The other thing I wanted to mention was the section that you have a report card for a student with a disability may contain information about his or her disability, including whether that student received special education or related services provided on the report card, informs parents, guardians about their child's progress or level of achievement in specific class, course, content, or curriculum. So I'm not sure that supports the student's rights, because that would be a violation of their HIPAA if you're disclosing their disability in the grade report.
And that was actually based on a court case that was stating that it was okay as long as it is talking about their progress. So, for example, currently we provide, and Dr. Avila can correct me if I get this wrong, but we provide progress on goals during that report card time. So those pieces could be part of that.
But that's then just shared with the parents, right?
Correct.
Okay. As long as it's not shared with other teachers, just the parents.
Right. It would go in there. Well, everything is on Parent Portal now. My brain goes back to the old days with an envelope. Sorry, but yeah, it's provided with the parents.
Okay.
I have a kind of a follow-up question along with the lines with Dr. Hessen. Currently, we have our students with IEPs getting 2 documents, correct? It's their actual report card plus their IEP goals and how they've progressed on them.
Correct.
So what, Dr. Hessen, are you speaking to the report card or their goals?
The report card.
The report card. So on the actual report card, that's exactly what you're talking about, right? I just want to make that distinction, that there is 2 different documents that are given for these students.
There are, and please interrupt me if you would like, there are 2 different documents that are given to the students. What is here is that there was court case that does state that you can put that in, you can put services on that report card if you so choose. If you're talking about, as it states here, their progress and how they're doing.
And if I can ask Ms. Carter, the board policy gives us the flexibility, should we choose to change our report cards to add that additional information to the report cards. And right now, that's not something we're looking to do, because the report card will actually speak to where is the student in their ability to achieve at a standard. And then the progress report will then provide regards to where are they toward their achievement of the goal. Those 2 documents are given to families for students who have an IEP. This allows us the flexibility, should we need to, in the future, add that additional information to our report cards, exists the ability to do that. But at this time, I don't think, Ms. Carter, we're not looking to do that at this point.
We're looking to keep all current practices current practices.
My only concern, I just bring this to your attention, is we don't want to create a situation of disparate treatment of our able-bodied students versus our disabled students. That would open the door to possible litigation. And the most important thing is that we want to make sure our students with disabilities are recognized for their abilities, as Board President Garza mentioned, their progress.
And so that court case allows us to do this. We wouldn't be, I guess, Mr. Sorega, I'm not, sorry to put you on the spot here.
Not a problem.
Is that, can we just confirm, and we're hearing from staff that this is the court case that there is a court case that allows us to do that. We will not be impeding or encroaching on parental rights if we continue this practice.
So if you're asking me to look into the court case and the analysis behind it and then provide you with a finding, I'm more than happy to do that. If you're asking me for my knowledge of the case as it currently stands, I can tell you I've not looked at that case, so I cannot give an opinion as to how it applies to this situation. So I guess my understanding, or my question is, would you like me to look into that case and provide you with that, with a report on the item and how it applies to the policy as it stands?
And just for a point of clarification, it's correspondence from the U.S. Department of Education and Civil Rights that describes it.
So would it just be more appropriate to ask for that copy in our Friday memo going into the second reading? That way
We could.
we don't have to give you extra work?
Yeah.
Okay,
That would be an easier way to achieve that.
Yeah, so
That's
I'll
good.
take the correspondence and provide it for you.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
You got it.
I would just like to suggest or make a comment that when we do board policies in regards to grades, are we working with teachers to get their input also in the process?
If we were looking to change any current practices, absolutely, and we're not looking to do that at this time. But yes, for example, there are a multitude of things that we could look at for equitable grading practices. However, without talking with teachers, admin, staff about changing those practices, we wouldn't bring it forward.
Okay. And the other thing that's a typo is called last date revised 8/10/2023. We haven't reached that date yet.
Yeah, thank you. It'll be there for that second review.
Board Member Stewart?
Yeah, I had the same concern as my colleague about the reasonable time and what's considered reasonable. When we go to the sites, how is that going to be determined? Will it be determined by each site? Will it be blanket across the district? Who is going to decide what's reasonable?
Do you want me? We're going to have to look into that with our admin staff. We wanted to be compliant with law, but as far as how that rolls out, we're going to have to work on that.
So then that will be included possibly in the second reading.
That's a massive change. So I would say let's keep it consistent. If we keep it consistent to where we're normally done, if we want to talk about grading practices that are going to change, what's reasonable and not reasonable, students taking retakes and not retakes, that's a whole conversation we got to have with the staff, and it's not a quick thing that we can just do right away. So we are going to answer that question, but for the purposes of this meeting here, I recommend that let's put that to the side, knowing that we're going to address it, because no practice is changing right now, right? But do we need to look at it to really unpack what reasonable means? Of course, because however many teachers we have, they'll interpret it differently, and that impacts students.
I guess I'm just a little confused with this whole procedure of how we're doing this and action items and board policies. So this is the first reading. We're just giving you our input on what we think, and then you're going to bring it back to us.
Yep, it'll come back in second.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Board Member Stewart. Board Member Critchfield?
Thank you, Madam President. So just to be clear, so the switching over to the no mark, how long have other districts been having that practice while we didn't?
Most of the regulations and policies, they were updated after the 2016 time. So that's why I gave you that timeline.
Okay.
So I can't speak to you correctly right now about this district did it at this time and this one at that time, but I can tell you that CSBA came out with it after 2016, and that's when those changes were made.
That's when most of them kind of switched over to that.
Mhm.
Okay. And yeah, thank you for doing this work. I think it's really important that our students are as competitive as possible, and I think a lot of students will benefit from this change. So thank you.
Seeing that, thank you, Board Member Critchfield. Seeing that we're not going to be embarking on changing this bylaw or this policy, I think I'm going to withhold my questions until then. So thank you so much, staff, for doing this work. So, let's see, where am I? So now, I'm going to go back for, do I have a motion to approve agenda item 9.2.1, first reading of a board policy 5121?
So
No?
there is no action being taken on the item. It was
So no.
informational.
No vote.
Yeah.
So just for clarification, all of these items on here are just informational?
No, so I believe the next item is a board policy change. It will be the second reading of that. and that's an action that you will take on that item.
Can I ask, so when we have them under action, is there like a clear way so we know?
So this is not the new format of
Okay.
board agenda meetings. This is kind of the way it's been done.
Right.
That new format will be rolling out hopefully at the next meeting. You'll be able to take a look at it and kind of see it. This is just put under that section. The fact that it says action, I guess your action is taken in the information if you want to, take it that way. But on that item specifically, it was informational only because it was first reading. It's not being adopted, at least the changes aren't. So basically, you can give direction to staff or give them your comments on it. They can make changes before it comes back for the second reading, but there's no need to take an actual vote on it. Whereas the next item, you're making a board policy change, so there has to be a vote, a motion to approve the change and then a vote.
So just in the future, we'll clean it up and have action items, and I know you have a whole plan,
Yeah,
so.
in the future, this item will actually probably be on a study session.
Okay,
So it'll be a whole separate meeting to discuss and be able to have that dialogue. Once it's vetted out, then it gets brought to the board meeting for actual item.
great, thank
action
you.
item.
Awesome.
Thank you, and that's why we have you here. So let's move on to item 9.2.2, revised board bylaw 9150, student board members.
So I'll, before I bring in Mr. Serga to talk about the board policy, this is something that we're bringing back to you. After the first time we brought it to you, said go back and review it again. So we did it, you organized a subcommittee of board members to work together with legal counsel and myself, and we actually did that. We did involve some of the students, and we think that we captured all of our thinking as to how the student board member should function. And so with that, I'm gonna have Mrs. Serga take us through that. And then at some point, if Mrs. Stewart, I know Ms. Armstrong's not here, but she was the other subcommittee member. If Mrs. Armstrong wants to add something after Mr. Serga speaks on behalf of the board, she can do that after that.
So
Totally up to you, though. You don't have to, if it's all covered.
I'll just give a brief presentation as to some of the changes that were made and what the policy as a whole will do. And then any other information can be provided to the board via any questions. So I'll start with the basic overall. A lot of it stayed the same in the sense of the petition has already been done. That process was according to the education code as it was. So we didn't really touch anything there. Some of the other kind of housekeeping items, the fact that a student board member is not considered part of the legislature for the purposes of the Brown Act, things of that nature, all stayed the same. I'm just gonna go through the changes that were made and highlight them. And then you can ask me any questions regarding anything else, but I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. So in terms of student board member eligibility, the student board member must be a senior during the term that they are serving. Justification for this, number one, it allows the highest number of students to participate in the student board position. For example, if you have a freshman comes in, runs for the board member position, and they get elected as a sophomore, and then as a junior, and then as a senior, they'll have served 3 terms, and those in that 3 term, those 2 terms, another student could have served, but wasn't able to because that individual continued to occupy that spot. So by forcing it upon seniors only, it allows the most number of students to participate in the program. Number 2, it also prevents the use of a student by outside influence to bring matters to the board. A student that's on for 3 years develops a bit of institutional knowledge, and that can be used for purposes of outside influence. So this way, they get the experience of being on the board. They do it in their last year of high school when they've achieved, hopefully, a level of maturity. And it allows the most number of students to participate in the program throughout the term. So another item where eligibility is measured is that a student must have a cumulative 2.0 GPA prior to running, and then they have to maintain that 2.0 GPA while they are in the service of their term or in office. The reason for that is any student that's below a 2.0 generally is probably struggling with school as it is. Adding additional responsibility could be seen as further affecting that student's performance. And then if they fail to maintain the 2.0 during their term, it generally tends to show that the office is obviously putting an undue burden on their academic career. And the main focus for any student should be their academic success and not any type of politics. So that was put in place to ensure that the student is keeping up with the academic rigor of their senior school year. Elections, we talked about elections. Elections, the process for doing the election is basically a process that's already in place. It's a system that has been used, and basically it allows staff to create that election policy, but the elections have to be done in April or no later than May, because that, if it's done later than that, it wouldn't give enough time to train the student board member. It wouldn't give enough time to conduct the lottery, which I'll discuss in the next session. But basically, it's the most optimal way to be able to get students to vote, and then enough time for them to be able to prepare for the term that begins July 1st. The other thing is, if nobody runs for a seat, because now it's moving to 3 student board members, and I'll explain in a moment how that works, but with 3 student board members, if there is a high school, for example, where nobody runs, that seat remains vacant for that term. So there has to be participation in order for them to have representation, if that makes sense. Now on to designated terms. Since you're moving to a 3 student board member system, the way it works is each of those students serves a 1-year term beginning July 1st, ending June 30th. They will be assigned rotational representation on the board, on the dais. So for example, 3 students are elected, a random lottery is conducted at the school district by the superintendent or his designated deputy, and that decides the order in which the students serve. So you have student A, B, and C. If the order is B, C, A, student B serves the first meeting, student C serves the second, and student A the third. If a student cannot be at a meeting, for example, they have other obligations, the next student in line will be eligible to sit on the dais for that meeting. And it just keeps going like that, kind of round robin, until the term is expired. The other thing is, the fact that they're seniors, their terms will probably be vacated beginning of June, because that's when they graduate. When they graduate, they're no longer a student at in the district. So that month of June will probably be a vacant seat, and it will get filled July 1st when the new student board members come in. So in that month period of time, you have the ability to train the new student board members as they're coming in. And basically, it is an empty month for the student board member position because of the reality of their graduation. In terms of training, the policy itself does not prescribe the exact training that a student board member will receive. There will be a curriculum put together by staff, likely with an orientation handbook that goes over Brown Act, Robert Rules of Orders, basically information that is needed by a new student board member. They can provide training to that student board member, but the reason that we didn't include specifics in the policy is because if there is a year where that training cannot take place before they take their term for whatever reason, it can never be brought back that the board violated their own policy by not providing that training. So it gives a degree of flexibility for circumstances that are unseen. They still will receive it, they will still get all that done. It's just giving the board or staff more flexibility in dealing with the issue of training. Because again, you cannot predict what will happen and if people are available or not. So the lottery system will also have to be done no later than 2 weeks prior to the start of term to provide the first student board member with enough notice before the first meeting so that they can prepare. And then in terms of the alternate student board member, so for example, if a student board member is not meeting their responsibilities either with school, their GPA, or on the board itself, they can be suspended from the board. The board is able to elect an alternate to replace that individual. You don't have to, but you can select an alternate student. So you can continue with the two that are present, or you can pick an alternate to serve as the third as well. Everything else is pretty much the same that it's been up to this point, including the first reading that was had. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. One last thing I will mention is that in order for a student board member to be able to cast or to make a motion, there has to be a resolution approved by the board in order to authorize them to do that. That resolution will have to come at a later date because it has to be brought before the board for consideration. But as it stands, they cannot make motions unless authorized by the board, and that is per the education code.
Can the board member make a motion for the student? So if the student approaches a board member and says, I'd like to bring this up for discussion
Yes, board
Okay.
members can make motions. They're fully authorized.
on
to do
behalf
so.
of the student.
On behalf of technically anyone, because you represent the people, so.
I have another question. I don't know if that's okay to go ahead.
Let me see, board member.
Honestly, I mean, he did it really well. A lot of it was based on ed code, so there was a lot of things that there's really not a choice. It's based on ed code, and you can see that in this policy. Everything was pretty straightforward. Like he said, we decided that seniors would be probably best just because of their age, maturity, having more people involved. That was a big topic of discussion. I think you did it great, amazing.
Thank you. Board member Hessen?
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. One of them is that the final deadline date is not listed here. I don't see it as the first week of June.
The final deadline date for?
For the student who's graduating, because our
It's-
previous student board member was really upset when we told him he couldn't come back for the rest of the month of June. So it's really important that, I think we have that on here.
That date is technically set by the date of the graduation, which I'm not sure if it's the same date every year for every school.
So I didn't see that stated here. Is it stated upon graduation?
It's under student board members designated term. It's the first and second paragraph, and it's ed code that it has to end on July 1st. It's the first and second paragraph under student board members designated term.
Well, that's what I'm saying, July 1st. They've already graduated, that's what I'm saying. So they can stay after that date? That shouldn't be July 1st, I'm thinking. It should be,
It's the second paragraph. In the event of an incumbent student board member graduates high school before June 30th, the position shall be deemed vacant as it's done.
So I think that what our fellow board member Stewart is trying to say is that once they are no longer students under our district, they no longer hold that position because they're not students.
I'm very well aware of that. I just want to make sure students know that.
Perfect.
That was
That was-
also ed code because we discussed that. We couldn't change the date because it's.
Yeah,
right?
so.
Oh, okay, so the date is actually
Yes.
the problem,
The
okay.
date is done by statute. It's July 1st to June 30th.
Okay, so, but the student knows that once he's graduated, that's it.
Yeah, and student will,
Go.
yeah.
The other
This is-
question,
This is available to them long before
Right.
that ever happens.
I'm just saying, because it was an issue with our previous
And it could be included in the training as well.
student, right, and I think that's important. The other thing is about the Brown Act, and I was told anyone who sits on the dais has to follow the Brown Act.
So if that were true, Sacramento would have to follow the Brown Act. federal government would have to follow the Brown Act, but they don't. They excluded themselves from it. So they have the authority to exclude pretty much anyone they want. And in the Ed Code, they specifically exclude student board members from the Brown Act.
So, but they are getting training on it, because I think it's important, because there's new guidelines under the Brown Act, which I'm sure you're aware of, having to do with social media. And many of our students are on social media. And as I was describing to board member Stewart, is that if the board member comes to me and talks to me about something and then goes to board member Stewart and says something, and then Stewart says something again to our vice president, for example, we violated the Brown Act at that point.
So
Unknowingly, I guess
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to say. So I think it's important. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Is that
yes,
if we're following it and then they're not, there could be communication that's relayed between board members that's given to the student, and it comes out in social media and so forth.
Yeah, so the problem is first of all, anything in closed session can't be disclosed anyway. They're not in closed session, so they have no reason to know that information. If they do, it's because someone disclosed it, and that's a wholly separate issue. In terms of what would be kind of like a straw man, if there's a link, or bicycle spokes, if there's a link that's basically causing a majority of the board to discuss items, that becomes a Brown Act violation. It doesn't necessarily have to be a student board member, it could be anybody. The problem is if the student board member talks to one board member and then takes that opinion on the item and provides it to a second and then a third, that would be a violation. So what I would
That's exactly
recommend
what I'm saying.
is, theoretically, the responsibility falls on you, the board member, to ask the question, have you talked to anybody else about this? And if they lie and say no, then you are clear. You won't be held to account for any violation that basically occurs from there.
Oh, wow.
Because you have asked, you have done your due diligence, there is no way for you to have known, unless there's some other circumstance which you knew but didn't want to disclose, that they have talked to other board members and you're in violation. So that's kind of the nuance of it. If you ask them and you do your due diligence and you either lied to or, whatever the case is, then you are not held to account for that.
I see. Okay. That was my main concern when I saw that, is that. But they are going to be trained on it, so they
Yes.
would have knowledge. That's important. Okay.
But best practice, always ask, have you talked to anyone else about this?
Okay. All right. And then the board member training, it when you said it gives the flexibility, it also allows us a broader range to provide training, right? Okay. All right. I think that was my main concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hassan. Board Member Critchfield?
Thank you, Madam President. So the only part that I have a question on, or maybe a request on, is the part where it's student board members may, at the board's discretion, receive elective course credit for a service as a student board member. I think it's really important that student board members that spend the time and are learning and doing this do receive the credit. So because it says may at the board's discretion, whenever it is time to make the motion, I would like to have that included, that we do direct staff to come up with a formula to have that included.
So you can basically direct staff at any time to prepare that. It doesn't need to necessarily be part of the motion. Basically, they're aware that the board is interested in doing so via the dialogue that's obviously taking place. They can craft that and bring it back to present to the board, maybe with different options in terms of how that credit is distributed. But it doesn't necessarily need to be part of the motion. And I wouldn't recommend changing it to shall give credit, because at the end of the day, that should be a decision for the board that's sitting at that time. And realistically, if it's a shall and the board doesn't want to, then they have to come back and change the policy.
Right.
So in this case, it gives you the option. That option has been expressed already and will come back, obviously, before the board.
So with that, would it be each time there's new board members. I mean, we haven't had the discussion about it, so I don't know how my rest of my board members feel about it. But I would say if we did say, yeah, it's a good idea that they get credit, each time that there's new board members, we would have to make that.
No,
Again.
so staff can do it through their regulations.
Okay.
And it's just put in, it's perpetually there until it's removed.
Is that something that we could do for?
Yeah, I think we need to, we need to investigate the course catalog that we have, see if there's something we can use. If not, then we'll have to establish a course that they can take credit for.
Is that something that's possible that we could have included?
Oh, yeah,
for the-
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
I would just have a concern that if we had a student absent regularly, we have to have criteria for them to earn that credit in order.
Yeah, I think
to
we need
be-
to investigate that a little bit
Right.
further because we also have the lottery process that's involved in this. So as far as elective credit, I think we need to research that a bit more.
So is that something that, because I know with upcoming student board members, is that something that we would have established before the student board members come on board? Or are we saying not this time around? I don't know how long that stuff takes.
Yeah, it depends on what's in the books right now. If it's in the books right now, something that we can use, we can definitely tag on to that. But I just, without looking at the course catalog to see if what's out there. Sometimes you have course catalogs, stuff established years ago, and we not access. So we're going to look into all that, and then if there isn't anything like there, then there's ways to create courses, or we can even. There's districts do it, and so it's a matter of just borrowing what somebody else has.
And I'm curious just on that topic. So because that was in the old policy, right, with the shall receive credit. So did the and I wouldn't know this, but did the previous board elect to not do it, or was it just not?
I think that this last year was you guys' first year of having
Right.
student board members, and
But that was in the policy.
just knowing how the year went, I'm almost positive that they probably didn't really look into all that.
Okay, they just okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Critchfield. So I believe all those questions, all my questions have been answered through all our other, through my colleagues. But I would also want to emphasize how important it is to give our students credit, you know, if possible. I know that we have some courses dealing with economics and government, you know, so maybe looking at that. But I'm just kind of spitballing here.
You're brainstorming.
Yes, absolutely. I want to help you out.
I want to keep in mind that it's elective credit too, so we want to look at that piece.
Yes. So hopefully we would be able to, you know, give these students who are going to be up and coming, you know, student board members with us here soon, the ability to have that. With that said, would you mind just keeping us, you know, updated as to how you're doing and if it's even feasible for this school year?
Yes, I made that promise to our student board members that helped us craft this, so we are looking into that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any other questions, comments, staff? Anything else?
This is appreciated. I think this is longstanding, so thank you for your due diligence. I know it was rushed last year, and we learned a lot from the students as well, and from this experience. I think we have something great. I know we had comment earlier about student cabinet at the site level. That's a piece that we are very excited about. So it's not going anywhere, even though it's not a part of the board policy per se. But the principals and the students are committed to establishing that student cabinet idea at the school sites.
And just to clarify what you're saying, Dr. Dradi, the student board member policy that we're looking at right now and the student ambassadors are completely different.
Yes, the ambassador piece is different. The cabinet I'm talking about is more or less, if you recall when the students did the presentation, they had an entire approach to where students can engage with other students on the school sites about issues with the principals and so on. So when they are representing here, their focus is on student activities and student functions and student leadership that's occurring at the school sites. So that cabinet structure is going to be something that the principals are very excited about, and that I'm personally excited about because I think it'll really increase the student voice.
And the reason why I wanted you to clarify that for us is because we want students and our board and our constituents to understand that this is something that we are positively looking at. We want to continue it. We just want to make sure that it's done correctly. Thank you.
Madam President, if I could make one more comment. I just want to say thank you again for working on this. And also, I want to say thank you to former student board member Mendoza, as well as, is it Lisa? I don't want to mess it up. Because they did a lot of work on this too, and it's really appreciated. I think it'll make things even better for us and the student board members in the future. And also, thank you to my colleague, Ms. Stewart, for doing the committee and doing that work. And I'm glad we got to this point. And my colleague, Ms. Armstrong, as well.
So point of order, is this an informational item or is this something that we're voting on?
This needs a motion.
I make a motion to approve bylaw 5150.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Alhesson,
Aye.
Ms. Stewart,
Aye.
Mr. Critchfield,
Aye.
Mrs. Garza.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Next item is item 9.2.2, revised board bylaw 91. I'm sorry, wrong one. Item 9.2.3, revised board bylaw 9124, attorney.
Great, thank you. This is something we are bringing back. So I worked with legal counsel to look at some of the directions you gave me, you gave us, the staff, and we were able to work on it. And so at this point, I'm going to invite Mr. Serga to speak on what we came up with.
So in terms of this item, previous policy required the board to get permission from the superintendent before contacting legal counsel. There was a desire expressed to look at that policy and develop something that allowed a little bit more ability for the board to get clarifying answers to questions that they might have. So in terms of that, the entire policy is pretty much the same other than the portion that dealt with that specific issue. So in going through that issue, I'm just gonna kind of quickly read over it because there is an updated version that should have been given to you. And I'll answer any questions that you might have. But basically, it allows an individual board member to seek legal clarification or advice on an agenda item, as well as updates regarding pending or current legal matters involving the district. The caveat to that is that's attorney-client privilege, so you can't take that and start telling everybody else. Otherwise, it breaks attorney-client privilege. You're definitely allowed to have that information, but much like closed session, it cannot be disseminated to others. It's purely an update for you, the board member. So any information that is obtained from council is going to be provided to the superintendent to be shared with all board members. So that way everyone has equal access to the information. Nobody's getting information to the exclusion of others. The goal behind that is to be able to foster that sharing of information with the board so that everybody understands what was asked and maybe even answers a question that another board member might have had. However, in sharing that information, you cannot share, the superintendent will not be able to share any comments or opinions expressed by the board member who basically requested that information. So if we discuss, let's say for example, an item before the board on an agenda, and I let you know this is my legal opinion on this item, and then you provide me with an opinion as to that item. I will not share that opinion with the superintendent or anybody else, because where you run afoul of the Brown Act is where you start giving information out as to the opinions or comments that other board members have made. So what we're doing is we're sharing information, which is completely allowed under the Brown Act. It's just there can be no discussion on that item outside of a public meeting. So because no information is being exchanged between board members or using one of staff as kind of a straw person to exchange that information, it doesn't run afoul of the Brown Act. Now, if a board member sees that information posted and comes and asks legal counsel a question as well, Obviously, I will never disclose what's discussed with the other board member because that would be providing you with the opinion or comment of that board member. So it's purely informational exchange or legal opinion provided by legal counsel. So in that sense, you know, the reality is the reason this balance was struck is because at the same time, the superintendent has a responsibility to take the board's direction and implement it within the school district. The reality is you do not want to create a relationship where the board uses legal counsel as a means to circumvent the superintendent, and that's not the purpose of this policy. This policy is to allow the board to receive information freely from legal counsel, but having said that, it's also incumbent upon the board to police themselves, because at the end of the day, I do provide a service for a fee. That's just the reality of the world. So if one board member is abusing it, that would be the time for the other board members to either cancel the policy, amend it or whatever, or talk to that board member and say, hey, by the way, you know, you're running up bills, and, you know, obviously there's a host of other consequences that can be associated with that. So my basic expression to you is be wise with your time, my time, the district's money, and seek clarification on items that, you know, you truly need that information on. And then the other positive is once you have that information, you can then go to staff, ask that information of them, which allows you to better prepare for the meetings in front of the public. So the point of this was to allow the sharing of information is the overall theme of it.
Thank you, Mr. Saraga. Board Member Alhassan?
Thank you. So in your description, I heard a lot of conflict. So help me understand this, because when you're saying a board member is meeting with you and they cannot come and share back information of what was discussed with you, then there is no transparency or collaboration, which is listed here with other board members.
So you can always say what you asked me. You can basically provide an opinion, but only to one other board member. Because if you do it to two others, that's a violation of the Brown Act. What I do on my end is I take what you ask, and then I provide the legal opinion I gave to you to the superintendent, who provides that information to everybody else. What I don't do is provide any comment or feedback that I receive from the board member, because that's where you would run afoul of the Brown Act.
So prior to this bylaw, board members are already meeting with you, and we're not receiving information from the remaining board members aren't receiving that information of feedback. So I don't understand.
So this policy is being voted on today.
Right.
Whatever happened prior was according to the bylaw in place at this time. So once this is in place, this is now a requirement on me as the general counsel to disseminate that information to the superintendent.
So the previous bylaw did not allow us to have direct contact with council, but that's going on right now anyway.
So from what I understood, there was some degree of confusion as to the bylaw, because it was understood that it had been changed, brought before the board and changed. Apparently that was not the case. So that's why it's being brought up today, because it was requested that it be placed on the agenda immediately for consideration of the board. So I think this clears up a lot of that confusion. I think this language is pretty clear. If you have questions, more than happy to clarify. But the goal is to provide a standardized system for which the board as a whole is beholden to.
Madam President, if I may. So one thing I noticed, and I know we got the last minute replacement, it looks like the biggest difference from the replacement page is identifying district general counsel, so making sure we're all talking about the same person.
Yeah.
Right, because, and can you explain the benefit of that, of making it clear who we're designating as who we're supposed to be talking to?
So the problem is, if you don't designate it, then there's obviously other attorneys at my law firm that, you know, and it's happened before. If a board member doesn't like what they're hearing from general counsel, they'll go to another attorney at the law firm and they'll try to talk to them to get a different answer or whatnot. The reality is, the structure at the law firm is such that any attorney that's there does not communicate with the board. They communicate the information to me, and then I communicate it to the board in order to prevent that runaround. So when it says general counsel, it specifically refers to the individual representing the school board in this chair.
Thank you.
Board Member Stewart?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Board Member Critchfield? I'll come back to you.
Let's see, I think I had one more. So the previous policy was contacting general counsel with, as long as the superintendent was involved in the conversation, correct?
Technically, I think it stated you have to go to the superintendent for approval
Correct.
to contact
Right.
general counsel.
Well, thank you for working on this. I think it's really important. I think when you move into a place of trust and a positive culture, it's good that everybody has the same access and access to the same information. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I know some districts don't even have policy on talking to their council because they haven't had the need to. And I think maybe in this district there has been the need for that policy of restricting access. But I'm really looking forward to easing those fears and bringing that positive culture. So thanks for your work on this and being accessible.
Thanks, sir.
So information that was already discussed prior to this being approved will not be brought to the board.
You can always request any information you want, but again, I cannot provide any comment on anything that was made. So any legal opinion or anything like that, you're always welcome to ask. One thing again, be mindful and police yourselves about the time that you spend basically in those kind of conversations.
Any other question, comments, staff?
Yeah, thank you. I think we'll if you approve it tonight, we'll start the process of this, and then part of the Friday memo section, the Friday memo that you receive on Fridays will be the information I received from Mrs. Serga to give everybody else. Did I say it right? I'm sorry.
No, it's
Sure,
all
take it. Sure, take it.
One more thing, if I can add. The law firm obviously provides billing to the school district, and that billing is a description of every 0.1 of an hour. So if any conversation is had with a board member, it shows up in the billing as well. So if at any point, you know, for whatever reason you feel like you need to double check that, those are always available to you as well to make sure that information is provided if there's a conversation that has taken place.
I'm
So
just
it's
concerned
kind of a
about
check.
transparency and information given to all board members. And so I'm hearing you say that that won't be happening.
I'm sorry.
The degree of transparency and information being communicated to the entire board based on what one board member communicates with general counsel sounds like it wouldn't be communicated to the entire board.
So
So
again,
I feel like the issue of transparency and collaboration is kind of hidden.
so the point of this policy is it clearly states that they can seek legal clarification or advice on agenda items, legal advice on agenda items. It's all about asking questions regarding the legality of the item. It's not about asking me how my day is or what my opinion of another person is. Those conversations I will not entertain. I strictly focus it to the legal issues in front of me. And whatever information I provide to one board member, that same legal opinion is provided to all others through the Friday memo, through the superintendent. So if the concern is that there will be back channel talking or anything, I'm only there to engage in conversations of legal relevance that a board member might bring. Anything else, I will not entertain.
And Dr. Al-Hassan, do you have any other question, comments? Okay, perfect. I do have a question, and just for clarification purposes, General Counsel is AMLO, not AALRR, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Just wanted to make that clear.
Also, it's not Bathan as well, right? Okay, I just want to make sure.
It's just,
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, having finished our brief questions, comments section, can we please have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the item. I lost the number.
I second.
just a point of clarification, generally there's 2 readings on any kind of bylaw. You can waive second reading and just approve it. The waiving of the second reading would have to be done in the motion.
I make a motion to waive the second reading and approve the policy.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Alhesson,
No.
Ms. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Critchfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Garza.
Yes. Now we're on to agenda item 9.2. Oh, actually, no, that's it. So we're on to consent agenda. Do any members of the board have any requests to withhold any agenda items this evening?
I do. And it's 9.3.58.
Thank you. Any other board members?
I would like to request 9.3.2.1.
Any other board members? Hearing none, I will now close the withholdings. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda except for items 9.3.5.8 and 9.3.2.1?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Dr. Alhesson,
Aye.
Ms. Stewart,
Aye.
Mr. Critchfield,
Aye.
Mrs. Garza.
Aye. Going on to the withheld items, pulled for separate consideration. First agenda item is 9.3.2.1. I'm sorry, 9.3.5. 5.8.
So let's do 9.3.5.8 first.
I'm sorry, I think I'm missing a number. 9.3.5.8.
So whichever one's pulled first, you can go in that order, or you can go in order of the agenda number. It's up to the board.
Thank you. Dr. Alhesson?
So that had to do with donations and gift giving for the board policy. And in reviewing it, we had talked about when a donation's given to a particular site, for example, when it was Mayfair, and Childress gave money towards the weight room, we wanted to be sure that money stayed at that site. And that was what we had talked about back in February. And in reading this, it doesn't state it as such. It rewords it as saying, and the big reason is we had many people from the public, students and teachers that wanted to be sure that any money that was given to that particular site would stay at that site. And now it's rewritten to be something else. Let me see, where is it?
Are we looking at the bylaw, or this just is a donation?
It's the bylaw.
But that's not the agenda item. The agenda item is just the acceptance of this particular donation, correct?
Oh, the
That is
donation itself, but the way it's written based on the bylaw.
That is correct. Which
Right.
bylaw are we looking at?
The bylaw is not there. I believe it's just the acceptance of a donation.
Yeah, the bylaw is, It was in the notes.
I believe that we voted on that bylaw last meeting. It's not in this board
No, I
book.
think I saw it. Was that, wasn't it in the board
This
book?
item 9.3.5.8, Dr. Alhassan, is in regards to the acceptance, and it's exactly stating what you are saying.
Right.
On the backup documentation for that, it states where the donation will go to, and that is Bellflower High School, that donation item will go to,
Right.
and will stay with Bellflower High School.
So I wanted to be sure that the bylaw was reflective of that. And in reading the bylaw, it didn't show that was reflective of that. So I just want to be sure we're consistent.
Yes, based on this donation and what you're accepting, is this donation will strictly be for Bellflower High School, and it will stay with them.
Okay. I'm looking for it, but I don't see it here. I think it was in the Friday memo.
Here.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
today is strictly about just whether you want to accept a donation or not. So we couldn't even discuss the policy at this point.
So I do remember seeing it was in the Friday memo, or was it in the?
It
earlier
was a
board
Friday
book?
memo. It was a
was?
Friday memo.
Okay, so that wasn't coming before the board. Okay.
That was my only comment.
Thank you. Board Member Stewart?
No, thank you.
Board Member Critchfield?
No, thank you.
Thank you. So do I have a motion to approve the acceptance donation to Bellflower Unified School District and to stay with Bellflower High School?
So moved.
Second.
May I have roll call, please?
Dr. Alhassan?
Aye.
Ms. Stewart?
Aye.
Mr. Critchfield?
Aye.
Mrs. Garza?
Aye. Thank you. Now, moving on to the next item pulled for separate consideration. It is item 9.3.2.1.
Yes.
And
So I'm just talking on it right now.
go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted clarification. I see a lot of teachers here listed for certificated personnel, and there's only a few probationary, and everyone's temporary, even teachers that have already been here for over a year. Can you explain to me the process of temporary probes? Is it probe 1, probe 2? How do they get off this temporary list, and why is almost everyone a temporary teacher at this moment?
So for staffing purposes, we have to align, so when we have teachers out of the classroom on special assignment that are already tenured and have that permanent position, we cannot offer somebody else a probationary position because those teachers, should they go back into the classroom, have a right to that position. So most of these positions are because of that. We do have several teachers throughout our district on special assignment. And once again, should the board decide and/or due to funding purposes, those teachers have to go back into the classrooms, then they would replace these temporary teachers. And
So
to-
there's almost 50 teachers on special assignment right now?
close to that, yes.
And some of these are counselors, some of these are deans. How does that differ with their position?
And because their positions are funded through through certain categorical programs, that should that funding go away, then those positions may also go away at that time.
So how long can these teachers plan on being temporary? Is this like going to be a long haul? Because other districts are taking our employees, our kids. When do they plan on being probationary or being able to be tenured?
So to answer that second part of the question there, what we do is, depending on when those teachers were hired with us in those temporary positions, we go through by that in terms of who first started in that temporary position once a probationary position opens up. So for example, as you stated, most of these are temporary, but should there actually become a probationary position, we would go with that first teacher that was originally hired as a temporary teacher.
And I guess one more question, you might not have this answer, but if not, maybe on the Friday memo, is what's the longest that we've had people on temporary?
Yeah, I wouldn't have that exact number of years on that, but we could get some information to you on that. It just depends on the situation.
Yeah, I just don't think it would be advantageous for our staff or employees for our school district to just have temporary teachers for 5, 6, 7 years. So I'd like to know how long they've been temporary, please.
Yeah,
We're-
and that has,
yeah.
sorry, Dr. Jardy, I was going to
So
say,
I think what we have to understand is how this district is made up. You're right, there's more TOSAs in our district than any other place I've ever seen. So when we right size our district budgetary wise, we're gonna be talking about that. We have to make a decision on because we're overstaffed at this point. And once those categorical funds and these COVID funds go away, we have to either go through rifts or we do away with temp teachers now. So I'm hoping that we do have the retirements I thought we were going to have. I think by next year we're going to have a slew of retirements. At that point, we're going to decide whether we want to replenish the TOSAs. But if we do, it has to be on temporary. If we're going to right size, and we won't have that many temporary teachers out. So it really has to do with how we're structured. So other districts aren't seeing this because they don't have 35 to 50 TOSAs outside the classroom. We do. So it's one of those things that we have to talk about as we discuss the budget for the future.
And when we're looking at restructuring, it might be possible to make some of these positions permanent positions, correct?
Yes, that's the idea. Had retirements occurred like I thought they were going to occur this year, guess what I would have done? I would have put a hiring freeze because we have to get our budgets in line. To a place where we can afford some of the ideas that we have about raises and everything else. So let's say the retirements occurred. The question before us would have been, do we need these TOSAs or not? And if we don't, then there'll be less temporary positions. But if we still want the same robust amount of people with the resources have, the only logical way to do this and to avoid rifts in the future is to keep people on temporary.
Thank you.
Dr. Hassan?
No comment at this time.
Board Member Critchfield?
No comment.
I do have a question. So 50 TOSAs right now.
50, I just know in the past, during the budget talks, I knew I counted about 35, 36. I've got to look at what the other ones are saying, so.
Yeah. I know that my comment will not be very favorable with some unions, but I think it is very important that we start looking at what are these TOSAs doing for our kids, because parents need us to make sure that their kids are progressing, specifically if they were hired for them to meet a specific gap. And are we meeting, closing that gap? Are we getting close? Like, as a board, we want to know that. So if you can please get us some information, maybe upcoming meetings on what does that look like? Have we invested our, TOSA's time and energy wisely? Pivot with the rest of the time that we have.
Yes, so the huge conversations we're having as a cabinet in July, all through July, as I think I mentioned before, really to understand our stabilization plan, our budget stabilization plan that we have to always have in place, given our situation. That question will be asked, right? So as a part of, anytime you deal with budget readjustments and all that, you have to ask what is working and what is not. That would be a direct question we'll ask to see if these TOSAs we have are impacting us or not. And if they're not, then we'll have a conversation around that.
Yes, thank you. And
President?
if we do need those TOSAs and if we're meeting those needs, if we find out that our kids need them, then obviously we will continue with them. It's not, it's having a TOSA but not meeting the need of our students that really doesn't, it irks me personally.
I just had another comment. I just want to agree. I think it is very important. Are they safe and civil TOSAs? Are they intervention? What are they doing? And I know that's a lot to ask, but I'm just wondering if we could not just maybe get just the amount of TOSAs, just the total amount on our Friday memo? Is that possible, or is that hard?
no, we can get that information.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions, comments, staff? Board members? Thank you. Okay, so then, do I have a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Alhesson,
Aye.
Ms. Stewart,
Aye.
Mr. Critchfield,
Aye.
Mrs. Garza.
Aye. I believe that was the end of the withheld items. We will now go on to the informational items, yes. Does the board have any questions regarding the informational items this evening? No? Okay, thank you. Board and staff communications. It's time for the board education members and staff. Dr. Dradi, do you have anything to report tonight?
Yes, so the district has recently completed the quarterly uniform complaint report summary for April through June, as required by the county as a result of the Williams settlement legislation. There were no complaints received during this quarter in the areas of instructional materials, facilities, or teacher assignments.
Thank you, Dr. Dradi. Dr. Alhesson?
No comment.
Dr. Stewart, Ms. Stewart?
Dr. Alhesson, you do not have a board report? Okay. Good evening. So in the past 3 weeks, I have attended training from the CSBA, the California School Board Association. On June 16th and 17th, I took the Masters in Governance Course 4, Human Resources and Collective Bargaining. And on June 28th, I took the Masters in Governance Course 5, Community Engagement and Governance Integration. I really enjoy these classes. I've learned so much already. The handbooks and the materials, they just provide continuing learning opportunities for myself, and I'm really happy to have these resources that I can use to answer questions that I have. I really like the courses because you get to collaborate with other board members in your area all throughout California, and many boards have policy that board members are required to take those courses in their first 2 years or first year or two on the board, and I hope that we can discuss that in the future. I attended a district subcommittee with Board Member Armstrong. I also had a demo in my summer school class for a Think Together program, which we also use here in Bellflower. And they did a presentation in my classroom on drones and how the students code and how they use computers to fly them. They did an art project with the kids. They had activities with music, musical chairs. They had cooking classes, and the students were just really excited about that. They were just telling me all about they made quesadillas and how great they were. And so it was really nice to see that in my own classroom, and I'm really excited that we're using that here in Bellflower. And just lastly, on the June 30th, I was actually at Bellflower High School. I was just walking around the track, and their summer school principal invited me over to see some of their school activities on the last day. And so I just observed the students doing a lot of just enrichment activities. They were just having a good time. The teachers were very engaged with this, and just they were really having a good time making connections with kids. Teachers were smiling. It was summer school. It was just a little bit more laid back. And so I really enjoyed that visit, and I just want to say thank you to their staff. Again, thank you to Ms. Lucchese and Ms. Gasper. They were the administrators there at that time. And I just want to say thank you for always welcoming me in and just doing positive things for our students. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Board Member Stewart. Board Member Critchfield?
Thank you, Madam President. It's always a busy few weeks. A lot of 4th of July goings on. The Lakewood Block Party. I did a video where I went to all 35 fireworks booths. That was really fun. I did miss one, and it happened to be our Mayfair band, so that wasn't a good look, but I went back and did something with them. But that was really cool. It's been a great 4th of July. And I also went to Robert Garcia's open house event down at the City Hall in Long Beach. But really, just been a lot of summer, starting to feel like summer, and but still being very active and a couple meetings with Dr. Dradi. And I have to say, I know a lot of times at these board meetings, we come across an item and we talk about it for a while. But behind every item, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I just want to say thank you to the staff that follows up on all these things. And, you know, it's a meeting for us and some follow-up conversations, but this is the work you do all day, every day. So thank you very much. And I know we pile a lot on your plate sometimes, especially with that Friday memo, but we really do appreciate it. Also, I want to say thank you to Chris. We talked about the board member policy for students today, and I'm just happy that us as a board are following up on the things that we talk about, and I think we're really focused on not letting things fall through the cracks and making sure things get followed through on. So I'm really optimistic about that. One more thing, like any district, there's things that we need to work on, and one of those things I think is going to be our outreach and communication. And I bring that up because I was leaving the gym a few days ago, and I got a notification on YouTube, like, ABC Unified's live. They were interviewing trustees. And it made me think, like, that's what really reaching out to the community is saying, hey, we're doing this special meeting. Nobody's probably going to know about it. And you get a notification on your phone. I think it's really important that we meet people where they're at and make that extra effort. So I would really like to see at some point us, I know our meetings are broadcast on our website. Sometimes it can be kind of hard to find. I would really like us to take that extra step to repost them on YouTube so people can get notified when we have meetings so they can stay more informed. I think those small things say a lot about our intention and not just doing the things to say, okay, we're doing it, but really go that extra inch to make sure we're reaching our parents and our community, especially as we look to build up enrollment now and for years to come. I think it's going to be really important that we soup up those efforts too. But all around, feeling good. Hope everyone's having a great summer.
Thank you, Board Member Critchfield. I'm just going to say ditto to that. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing some of these data talks pretty soon, looking at our district, see where we're at as a board. I think that that's something we haven't engaged in, as often. But I know that for myself, I'm really looking forward to that. I'm a data person, and we need to see those numbers. So thank you again, staff. I do appreciate, all the work that you put in during the summer while, all of us are off. So with that, if there is no objection to this meeting, is adjourned at 8:39 p.m. until the regular board meeting to be held on August 10th, 2023.